BKS presents You Can Draw with Steph Wilson and Carrie Ann.
So what we're going to be doing is drawing a raven, but what I'm going to do is draw him flying through the air so you can see everything about him, his little feet and his tail and everything. All right. Okay. So to draw the raven, he's going to fill up the page. So his little wings are going to fill up the page, his head and his tail and stuff. So right in the middle top of the page up here, you don't need too much room above him. We're going to draw an eye, and that's going to help us decide where the rest of his raven face is going to go. So right in the middle of the page, draw a nice oval. And then so that he's looking at us, you're going to draw a little black oval in the center for a pupil, but draw it over to this side of the eye. Okay. And now what we can do is we can draw his beak in. Now ravens have a rounded beak at the top that comes down. So from right here next to his eye, start drawing that round shape of a beak, like a big crescent. It wouldn't be like a pointy beak like you'd see on a songbird. So big crescent for the top of his beak. And where that beak ends, you're going to draw the rest of his beak in here. And what it does is, it's got a little point to it. So give it a little point. And I'll zoom in. It's a very little point, but it's to show that there's a little point at the end of the beak. And now give it a nice curved shape back up to where your other line is. And that's the top of his beak. And right there, somewhere in the middle beneath his eye, put a little oval. That's his little nostril hole. Now we're going to make our raven smiling, or at least have his mouth open, making him look happy. So draw a little line down. And then a big swoop down along his beak. And then go right back up to the bottom of the beak that you already drew. That's the open part of his mouth. Now we have to show that his bottom beak is here too. So draw a line that goes exactly along the one you just drew and goes right back up and then stop right where the opening of his mouth is. And this is the part where his beak hinges. So it doesn't meet in a line. It's got a little round shape to it, and go back to your original line there. And you'll see that like in the Heckle and Jekyll cartoons and stuff like that, or any of the bird cartoons. And then right here inside his open mouth, just draw a little half circle for a tongue. And sometimes when you're drawing, it's helpful to shade in the dark parts because you can see how the rest of it's going to look. So if you want to do that, you can shade in the open part of his mouth. And now his beak makes a lot more sense. Now it's time to draw his other eye. And his other eye is going to pop up right behind his beak here and be the same as the one you drew before, except it disappears a little bit behind his beak. And the same way you drew an oval inside for a pupil, draw one on the side again for this eye. And that's going to be the face of your raven. Now all we have to do is draw his head and his body and his wings and his tail around it. We're going to start going around for the shape of his head, but we got to show little tufts of feathers on the top of his head. So as you go, just put in some little zigzags like that to show that it's not a smooth line. Little Little bumps to the line, little triangle, pointy things to the line. Before you come around and stop right about where his beak is. And that's the head. Now what we can do is, I'm going to move this over a little bit. We're going to draw a wing right here because the way his head is turned and the way his body is going to be, this wing is completely behind his beak. And once we draw this wing and put it on the paper, then we'll see where to draw the other wing. So sometimes it helps because once you place one thing, then you can place the other thing that goes with it. So from his beak, swoop out in a nice long line, almost to the edge of your paper. Then come down a bit and go back about halfway the way you came out. And what we're going to do is draw a bunch of feather shapes beneath that. So come out from that line, leave a little gap at the end, and that shows feathers. Like if you draw it solid, it doesn't seem very feathery. But if you leave a little space right here between the two, before you start your next feather, then it'll look like little feathers sticking out. Once again, go down, come back. And do that 2 more times. Go out a little bit, come back. And we're not going all the way back to his beak because we're going to do another row of feathers. And then one last one over towards his beak. And then this one right here is the last one, which will finish off his wing and go all the way to his mouth with that one. Okay, and that shows that the wing is coming out from behind his head. Then to show that there's feathers in the wing, what you do is kind of like the way we drew the feathers here, but just don't draw the whole one. Draw just the bottom half of a feather like that. Okay. You don't want to draw the top of it, just draw the bottom. Leave a little space in between. And do that with each of them. Just draw a little line to show a second row of feathers. And on a raven, there's multiple rows of feathers in the wing. But with a cartoon version, you don't have to draw all of them. But if you just drew long ones, then it would look like just single feathers. This shows that there's more feathers on his wing. Now that we drew a wing on one side of the page, we can draw a wing of about the same shape and size on this side of the page, because now we know what it looks like and where it is. So the same way we swooped out here, we're just going to go in the opposite from this side. And what you do is, right from where you ended his head, swoop out till you get to almost the edge of the page and make that feather shape. Oops, zoom in without knocking the stand over. And the same way we drew the second feather there, leave a little space, come back, just don't go all the way back. Each time you do it, you go a little further. Oops. Each time you do it, you go a little further back towards him, but don't go all the way back because we want to do that second row of feathers too, like we did on the first one. So a little space. This is number 3. A little space, number 4. See, I'm getting closer into where his body is going to be each time. And it's okay, it's not specific. It'll look like feathers when you're done. So if your line doesn't go back as far or whatever, it won't matter. it'll still look like a feathered wing. And then finally, that little last one on the bottom, it goes all the way in. And now, like on the first wing we did, we want to show that extra row of feathers. So from right where that line ended, draw a feather in. Just the bottom half again. And then same thing, right from the end of that line, another one. From the end of that line, another one. And now you get that look of 2 layers of feathers. And there would be a lot more feathers, obviously, on a real raven. But this gives you the idea that there's a bunch of feathers in the wing. Now, what makes a raven unique is he's also got little feathers beneath his beak. His little throat feathers or ruffle. It's almost like lions have it too. Not the mane, but that little, or cats. They have that little fluff beneath the neck. And the way you do that is just draw a line down. Go back up a little bit. And this is kind of like what we did on his head, except we're doing it down below now. It's just a couple little ziggity lines to show that there's some roughness there or some feather tufts. And the last one, and just go back up to his neck. Now, it's not a different color or anything like on a turkey or a chicken where they have that red wattle hanging down. These are just black feathers like is all over the rest of them. They just happen to be a little fluffier and stick out a little more on his neck. Now, what we're going to do is draw his little round body. It's going to be right about here. Okay. But before we can do that, we've got to draw his feet, because what we're going to do is draw his feet up in the air like he's snatching at a bug or a berry with his little feet up. So if you can see that, we have to draw those feet because his body disappears behind those feet. Those feet are going to be closer to us in the picture than his butt and his tail. So we're going to have to draw the feet in. And they're easy shapes to draw, and you just got to kind of guess where to put them. So I'll show you. Right beneath his little neck tuft, same shape oval as his eye, about the same size, draw an oval. And that it seems kind of strange for a bird foot, because you're used to drawing like little lines for a bird foot. But we're looking at the end of his toes. So his claws are coming over like an eagle snatching at a fish or something. If you've ever seen a nature video, their claws come up like that. So we're looking at the end of his claw. So right next to that oval, draw an oval that goes into that. It's going to look like 2 little eggs or something next to each other, like drawing 2 Easter eggs next to each other. And we're going to draw a total of 3. So the third one goes behind that first one you drew 2. And now it looks like, guess what? It looks like 3 Easter eggs next to each other. And then right down below this, a little bit smaller, draw his back claw. They have little birds, chickens. You can see it on chickens especially, because you see them a lot more often than you see ravens. You'll see there's a little back claw to their feet. They have 3 little claws in the front and 1 in the back. And this little back claw is joined to his other feet with a little curved line going to each of the outer, let's call them Easter eggs for the rest of this drawing. And that part right here, so this is his front 3 claws, his back claw. This is the underside of his foot. So if you were to look at somebody's foot who was laying down, you would see their toes, you would see their heel, and you would see the underside of their foot. And that's the same thing with a bird. Their foot's just a little shaped differently. Inside each of these little circles, we have to put his little talons. the little pointy part of his little toes. So what you do is just draw a little pointed oval inside each of the ovals you did. Okay? And that shows that he's got talons, like, like eagle talons. On a raven, they're not so big as they are on an eagle, but they do have a little pointy tip to their toes to grab onto things, like branches and food. And now ravens have 2 feet, so we have to do another one. And they're both up in the air like that because he's flying through the air and he's getting ready to grab something. So go to the side of the one you just drew. Make it a little bit smaller for your first circle, or oval, I should say. So as you can see, it's a little smaller than the ones I drew over on this side, because this leg is turned a little bit away from us, so it would appear a little bit smaller. And because it's turned to the side, rather than draw an Easter egg on either side, we're going to draw them right next to each other on one side. So next to your oval, draw 2 slightly smaller ovals going away to one side. And now we're going to be able to see that shape of that back foot a little bit better than the first time we drew it, because the first time we were looking straight on. So beneath this first talon that we drew, or toe, draw another oval beneath it for his back claw. And it's going to look very similar to the one you were doing just a few moments ago. This time, join it with a longer curved line out to the end. And this curved line, just reverse the way you did it last time. Make it, and I'll show you a little closer, make it go out a little bit. And now that foot looks a little bit turned to the side, whereas this one, you're looking straight on. This one, you're kind of looking at the side of it. And then don't forget to add his little talons inside each of those circles. So the 3 toes on the top and the one on the bottom get a little sharp talon inside. And now that we put those 2 feet in there, which are closer to us, we can draw the rest of his body, which would be behind his feet. So from his neck, draw a line, curved line down to his first toe there. And it would pass behind the toe and draw it right to the middle of his other foot like that. Okay, and that's his belly. And then from the way it passed behind his foot here, it passes behind his foot here and goes up to his wing. And then right here, I'll zoom in close. Right here next to his foot, we have to put his leg in. Just draw a straight line right up to his belly. We won't see his leg here because it's behind his foot. But on this side, we would see his leg because it's sticking out. It's sticking out from his belly here. His leg would be right behind his foot here if you were drawing it, but you can't see it in this particular angle. I'm waiting for.
It's okay.
So what we're going to do is draw his tail. We're going to draw his tail coming down from here. Now, one of the things that, there's a lot of things, but one of the things that makes a raven different from a crow is that his tail is wedge shaped, not round. So, and I'll show you what I mean by that. This is a scrap piece of paper. So for a crow, their tail would look like this, rounded. For a raven, what makes their tail stand out, if you're ever bird watching, is their tail actually comes to a point like this. So bird watchers call this a wedge-shaped tail. Some birds have it. And this is a rounded tail. And the rounded tail is on a crow. And the raven has a wedge-shaped tail. One of my favorite birds is a swallow. Swallow has a Y-shaped tail, which is really cool, with really long feathers on the outside. And you can always see them when they're flying because of their tails. They're so distinctive. So what we want to do is make sure we give our raven a wedge-shaped tail. Otherwise, he look a little bit like a crow. So starting right from the center of his butt, right between his feet, swing out with a line that's going to be a feather, okay, and give it a little end to the feather. And then right next to it, we're going to draw his next tail feather, but we're going to want to make it come down a little bit further. So right next to it, draw a line, only come down a little bit further. And then we're going to draw his little center feather for his tail. So we're going to come down a little further and then end it in a little point. And now draw a line going back up towards the center, almost as long. And that's his middle feather. And now to keep that wedge shape, think of that wedge shape right here, okay? Draw the end of a feather and go up. See, we're keeping that wedge shape intact on his tail. And then one more, so they match. So we've got 5. 5 feathers is enough to show he's got a tail. Let's go all the way back up to his butt. Okay, and like his wing, he'll have little feathers, another row of feathers. If you've ever seen a bird's tail up in the air, it's usually composed of like 3 or 4 rows of feathers. They're much longer than wing feathers and certainly much longer than body feathers because they fan out. But there are rows of feathers. So just add a couple lines to show there's another row of feathers there. And now you've drawn a raven. Now ravens are really, really easy to color. There are no other colors needed. All you need is a pencil. Obviously, you can color it much neater than I am. But once you color him black, even his beak is black. Once you color him.
What's the inside of his mouth?
Dark. Probably like a reddish brown. Could be a brighter pink maybe, but I don't think so. I think they have a darker inside of the mouth. But once you color all of him black and you put the right tail on him and the right beak on him, then people will know he's a raven. I mean, when they first look at him, I say, oh, black bird, they're going to think crow because crows are so much more common. But if they look close and they see you've got a wedge-shaped tail and you've got this really rounded beak, then they'll know that he's a raven. The only thing that doesn't get colored black on a raven are his eyes and his tongue.
Thank you so much for drawing and watching with us. Please like, comment, and share